first couple weeks in Yangon, there wasn't really any violence against the protesters. So you were seeing, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, the biggest crowds I've ever seen anywhere in my entire life, choking every single major road all over Yangon. And the police and soldiers were pretty much just letting it happen. And there was a space for the press to go where we were taking pictures. We were going right up to police and soldiers, taking pictures of them, and that was totally fine and allowed and everything. And then towards the end of February, it just kind of flipped like a switch. And I always say, like, the protesters weren't doing anything differently. There was no additional threat. Everyone was still being completely peaceful. And all of a sudden, the police and soldiers just started shooting. They started with rubber bullets and stun grenades and tear gas. And very quickly, it was only like maybe 2 days of that non-lethal violence before it switched to live rounds. So that Washington Post article was the first protest crackdown where they just started shooting people in Yangon, because there had been a couple of crackdowns in other places before that. And very quickly, I realized that being a journalist was also just no longer meant anything. So I'm with like a group of protesters, and they're, protesting, and the police just start shooting stun grenades, or we don't even really know what they were shooting, because all of a sudden we're turning and running. And now I'm just sprinting away with the protesters. Somebody grabs me and pulls me into a shop front, and they pull down the metal gate, and we all hide there for like 10 minutes until the police go away. And this is the type of stuff that was happening over and over again. So then the foreign policy article was about the way that the protesters started to adjust to these crackdowns. And it was kind of more orchestrated things like that. So they'd have kind of intentional things set up to slow down the police and soldiers. And then they'd take advantage of those delays, scatter, take shelter with their neighbors, because everybody, 90%, maybe even more of the people that you met in Yangon were in support of the protests. So you could go into anybody's house and hide, and they'd hold you there. And then when the police and soldiers left, they'd all come out and start protesting again. And that lasted for a while, but, eventually the death toll has just kind of kept getting higher and higher and higher. And one of those stories that Frontier was recognized for was the Long Taya massacre, where over 65 people were killed. And that was one of the real turning points where people kind of realized that it wasn't sustainable. And you had a lot of people who kind of stopped protesting, but then you also had a lot of people who thought, okay, well, if we can't protest, then we're going to turn to armed revolution in self-defense. And that's, where we are today.